Google, it's interesting that they're paying. To me, actually writing about Google in that article was the most fun for me because there's parts of Google that have always been hard for me to sort of square in my head. Why do they spend so much on AI when it's so disruptive to their business? And then it's like, well, you know what? AI is what, like, that is Google. That was what Google was founded to be. Google was there to know everything in the world and to give you the right answer. So this is a bit where, for all the critique of Google you can have being old and bloated and slow and all that, there is the germ of what Google was founded to be is still there, and that's why they keep spending and why they're pursuing this. And I think doing better than I thought they would do, frankly, over the last couple of years, especially compared to how much they stumbled in reaction to sort of ChatGPT at the beginning. But if you're an Apple, you're like, okay, everyone's using AI apps on our devices. We're not, are we gonna make money from AI? Is this just like, it's kind of a thing, we got to do it because everyone's doing it. But if that is your perspective, are you gonna be able to sort of come up with the gumption and the willingness to spend what needs to be spent to sort of catch up? And so the reason why I think
talk about spending, we're talking about spending on talent, but also the context
GPUs,
for that. The GPUs,
everything.
they were sort of cheaping out on GPUs. It was reported over the last week or so as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's been sort of that's sort of been a known thing for a while, and it's not. What I want to articulate is this actually isn't a surprise. Apple's ethos is a tool maker. It's giving people devices to, the Steve Jobs, like computers are a bicycle for the mind. They don't want to replace the mind, they want to augment the mind. That's sort of like core to what they are. So that's the philosophy bit. You combine that with the business opportunities for Apple, at least in the short term, is fairly neutral, right?
Yeah.
Like the main payoff to Apple of investing heavily in AI is reducing their margins. It's not going to help them sell more phones. And so given that,
and they also they don't necessarily see like the existential risk that a company like Meta might see.
That's right. Or the existential opportunity, which I think also exists for Meta. So given that, it's just like, under what basis are they going to actually really compete here? And given that, it feels like the path towards a Microsoft-like situation where you're ultimately partnered and dependent on someone else using your cash to get into a competitive position, as opposed to building it yourself. It's going to be forced on them whether they like it or not, just because like there's a limited number of people in the world who can do this stuff, and they're not going to have them. And so it was interesting to write about this sort of in reverse, even though this story broke first about them investigating partnering with Anthropic or OpenAI or someone else. It almost made, I was glad because of the break, I was able to write about it in reverse. Write about like why they're probably not going to spend, which leads to, well, then what are they going to do? They're probably going to
have to spend a different way. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and so,
but way that's much more sort of amenable to a managerial corporate mindset, which is we're paying for this thing that we need, as opposed to having to recruit people and manage them and give them a mission and motivate them and all the things that go into the people aspect of it. Or just write a check. And writing a check at the end of the day is probably going to be the easiest solution.
Well, it's amenable in a management construct and from a strategic standpoint, but is it amenable to Apple management given the deals that they've become used to over the last several years? So later in the Bloomberg piece, they report, while discussing a potential arrangement, Apple and Anthropic have disagreed over preliminary financial terms, according to the People. The AI startup is seeking a multi-billion-dollar annual fee that increases sharply each year. The struggle to reach a deal has left Apple contemplating working with OpenAI or others if it moves forward with the third-party plan, they said. So you said there were several things interesting about that paragraph. Let's unpack it. What strikes you as interesting about the implications for the various parties involved there?
So let me first state my personal preference, which I've articulated on this podcast a few times, because that's not the control. That's not going to control my analysis going forward. My personal preference is Apple just rips out everything and puts ChatGPT in there. Like, ChatGPT is the most important tech product to me. What I want is I want a phone for ChatGPT. So if I could get a deep integration of ChatGPT in a phone, that sounds fantastic to me.
And when we talk about Apple partnering with ChatGPT long term and potentially deepening the integration, I mean, what's the incentive for Apple to do that as opposed to just saying, well, you can access ChatGPT on your phone now, and we don't need to bend over backwards to make it any more unified with what we're doing and what our platform is?
Well, the problem is Android is going to get very deep AI integration. I mean, Google's going
Yeah.
to do it all themselves, and it's going to be like, if ever Android is going to make inroads into the iPhone, this is going to be the way that it happens, because it's just a superior experience with AI. And then, OpenAI is going to make hardware at some point. There is risk to the franchise
So that's the
with
concern,
AI.
and that's why inevitably Apple should partner with one of these model makers in order to supercharge the Siri part. I sort of yada that part earlier when I was talking about Apple inevitably going this direction, but the concern is if they don't do this and figure out making
Right, if
the
you're
Apple
stuck just using
Intelligence
AI and
dream
apps on
real.
iPhones, and like you
Yeah.
have this incredible like integrated experience elsewhere, there that's not
3 years
ideal.
from now, Apple could look like vastly inferior to either Android or whatever OpenAI releases. Okay, so we've got that. What do you think about the financial terms being bandied about between Apple and Anthropic?
Well, but before I get to Anthropic, let me finish on the OpenAI point, which is I don't think it's in OpenAI's interest to say, okay, here's our model, and we'll configure it to run on your servers, and you can call it Siri.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, their goal is or at least ought to be a preeminent consumer brand, which means it's ChatGPT branded. It links with ChatGPT on the web and their future devices to sort of like split the kingdom and say we're going to have a white label solution for Apple, just to get like more leverage on our cost. I don't think that makes sense for them. I
Yeah.
think for them, if they want to partner with Apple, it's not called Siri anymore. It's called ChatGPT, and the iPhone is the best ChatGPT device. And I
And it's
think
the
that would
same
do
experience everywhere in that scenario as
what
well.
I think that would be amazing for iPhone sales in the short to medium term. I actually think it would provide a boost, but you're giving away the interface layer, right? I analogized it to Samsung and Android. Like, do you want to be the Samsung to OpenAI's Android, where they actually control the most important software layer, and it's clearly them, and they can also go on other devices, and you're reduced to being a bit of a commodity. I just have a hard time seeing Apple doing that. I think they probably shouldn't do it, which leads to Anthropic. Anthropic's not going to be a consumer brand. Yes, Claude is out there. It's not anywhere outside of Silicon Valley. You can sort of look at the numbers, but at the same time, that's a problem for Anthropic because they have to spend the same amount as OpenAI, but without that revenue stream or potential revenue stream that OpenAI has. And so they're really focused on agentic workflows, on like one-shotting jobs, and like I think there's a potential real enterprise play there for them. But from their perspective, I think it makes sense to say, yeah, Apple will give you a model you can white label. We'll get
Mm-hmm.
it to work on your private cloud compute, and you can call it Siri. So the Siri brand remains. It's still Apple's control of the interface layer on top. It's just with a vastly better model that they're licensing from Anthropic. But from Anthropic's perspective, they're doing this for money.
Yeah.
They need to pay for this. And that's why they're charging Apple a very high price. And I suspect that came as a bit of a surprise to Apple. Why? A year ago, they're like, we did a deal with ChatGPT and they're providing it for free. It's
Yep.
like, yeah, but ChatGPT wants access to iPhone users. You're paying them in exposure and sort of the incentive to sign up for a ChatGPT account and to get a subscription. If Anthropic's not going for that.
They're not
So
playing
if
that game. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. And so I think the real question for Apple with these two companies is keep control of the brand, keep it called Siri, get a world-class model, pay a lot of money. That's the Anthropic option.
Mm-hmm.
The other option is lose control of the brand, kill the brand, call it ChatGPT, risk becoming a commodity player, but ChatGPT might do like OpenAI might do it for free because that's part of their play. So
Well, and
what
in
matters
that
to Apple? Is it
scenario,
money or is it brand and control?
yeah, well, it's funny because it sort of brings various Apple neuroses into stark relief here with the choice that they have to make going forward, because there's also Meta lurking in the background, which I'd
Well,
like
that's
to
the other
discuss
thing is
shortly.
the company that might give them what they want at a much lower price is Meta. Like Meta
Yeah.
would love just like maybe not as much as Anthropic because they're paying a lot of money, but chip in a little money to train Llama, and you can have it. You can do with it what you want. Apple and the thing is, Apple and Meta have always been natural partners. Meta built the App Store. Meta made all those ads that people installed apps that bought
Mhm.
in-app purchases that Apple benefited from, and Apple, as I've written endlessly, and there's some of these things where you're like nothing matters in the short run. You keep writing about it, but ultimately, like it comes home to roost. There's a bit about not seeing Meta appropriately and the importance and appreciating what they did for Apple and what they did for the App Store that comes back to bite you. And I think this is a great example. Like I think a functional Apple Meta relationship actually could solve this problem pretty efficiently to the benefit of both companies. But
Yeah.
I threw it in at the end because I'm like, this obviously isn't going to happen, which is a condemnation of Apple leadership. How is it not one of the options on the table?
Well, it was really gratifying when I got to the end and you finally mentioned Meta, because the entire time I was reading you like back and forth the Anthropic and OpenAI solutions, and I was like, Meta is trying to win the consumer market and is currently way behind and could really use Apple's help getting like into the daily lives of
Well, but
millions and millions of people.
even if it's not branded Llama or branded Meta, I think Meta would do a white label deal. They're spending so much money on Reality Labs and on this whole super intelligence thing. Like I think that like they would appreciate like some money to help make this happen, and probably less money than Anthropic.